The bright studio lights blazed down on Vice President J.D. Vance as he sat across from Emma Sinclair, the renowned liberal TV host known for her sharp tongue and unwavering hostility toward conservative figures. The cameras rolled, millions of Americans tuned in, and the stage was set for a fiery debate. Emma leaned forward, her polished nails tapping on the desk as she smirked, ready to pounce. "Mr. Vice President," she began, her voice laced with condescension, "let's cut to the chase. You're nothing more than Donald Trump's political puppet, aren't you? A man who follows orders without question." A hush fell over the studio. Even the hand-picked liberal audience, who had been carefully curated to support Emma's narrative, gasped at the audacity of her remark. The tension was palpable. The insult had been delivered, and now the world watched, waiting for J.D. Vance's response. For a brief moment, J.D. remained silent, studying Emma with the quiet confidence of a man who had built himself from nothing, served his country, and faced challenges far greater than a smug television host. Then, a chuckle rumbled from his chest, a deep, knowing laugh that sent a chill down Emma's spine. "Emma," J.D. said, shaking his head, "I have to admire the effort. Really, but if supporting my president makes me a puppet, then what does that make you? An unpaid spokesperson for media elites who tell you exactly what to think?" The audience erupted in nervous laughter. The trap had been set. Emma's smirk faltered for just a second, but she quickly recovered. She was used to controlling the conversation. This was her domain, her stage. She crossed her arms, her confidence unshaken. "Come on, Mr. Vance," she scoffed. "The whole country sees it. You defend Trump no matter what. Do you even think for yourself?" J.D. leaned back, completely unfazed. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with intensity. "Do you?" he countered smoothly, "or do you just repeat the talking points your producers feed you every morning?" The audience gasped again. For the first time, Emma hesitated. The power dynamic was shifting. This wasn't going to be the easy takedown she had planned, and J.D. Vance was just getting started. The tension in the studio thickened as Emma Sinclair blinked, momentarily caught off guard by J.D. Vance's sharp retort. This was not how things were supposed to go. She had entered this debate expecting to corner him, to put him on the defensive, to make him stumble like so many others before him. But now, for the first time in her career, she felt the ground shift beneath her. J.D. leaned back in his chair, exuding the calm confidence of a man who had nothing to prove but everything to reveal. His voice, steady yet cutting, sliced through the silence. "You see, Emma, the difference between you and me is simple," he said, his eyes locked onto hers. "I don't take marching orders. I don't wake up every morning and wait for my bosses to tell me what I'm allowed to say. I stand by my principles. And that, I think, is what really bothers you." A murmur rippled through the audience. Even the most ardent supporters of Emma Sinclair could feel the power dynamic shifting in real time. The hand-picked liberal crowd, who had come to watch J.D. Vance get humiliated, now found themselves watching something else entirely. Emma clenched her jaw. She wasn't about to let him steal the moment. "Oh, come on, Mr. Vance," she scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "Let's be honest here. You don't just support Trump. You worship him. You defend him no matter what. The American people deserve to know. Do you even have a mind of your own?" J.D. Vance's eyes gleamed with something dangerous. Conviction. "Emma," he said smoothly, "do you even have a mind of your own, or do you just repeat whatever your producers script for you?" The audience gasped. Emma's polished facade cracked. Just for a second, she opened her mouth to respond, but J.D. didn't give her the chance. He leaned forward, his voice lowering, forcing everyone in the studio to hang on to his every word. "You came in here with a plan," he continued. "Insult me, call me a lapdog, try to make me look weak. You thought I'd fumble, that I'd struggle to defend myself. But you didn't plan for one thing. What if I fight back?" Emma shifted in her seat, gripping the edge of the desk slightly. The cameras caught everything. The small flinch in her expression, the way her fingers tightened as if holding on to control that was slipping away. JD tilted his head, pressing forward. "You say I blindly follow Trump," he said, "but let's talk about your track record, shall we? 4 years ago, you sat right in that chair and swore on national television that Trump would never step foot in the White House again. You laughed at the idea, mocked it, called it impossible. And yet here we are. Trump is sitting in the Oval Office, and I'm sitting right across from you." The audience erupted in applause. The sound echoed through the studio, and for the first time in her career, Emma Sinclair didn't have control. She tried to recover, shaking her head with forced amusement. "Mr. Vance, you're dodging the question." J.D. Vance didn't let her escape. "No, Emma," he said, his tone unwavering. "I'm answering it in a way you didn't expect." He leaned in, his voice soft but lethal. "You don't have a problem with loyalty. You have a problem with who I'm loyal to." Emma's lips parted, but no words came out. The studio was silent. Even her own audience, once eager to cheer her on, now seemed hesitant. J.D. leaned back, satisfied. The truth had landed. And Emma Sinclair, queen of the media, master of controlling the narrative, was drowning under it. Her hands trembled slightly as she shuffled her notes, desperately searching for something, anything, to regain control. But J.D. had already exposed what she feared most. She wasn't here to question him. She was here to tear him down. And now, the whole world could see it. Emma inhaled sharply, forcing a grin, her last attempt to salvage the moment. "If you're not Trump's errand boy, then what exactly are you, his guardian angel?" J.D. chuckled, shaking his head. "No, Emma, I'm something you'll never understand." The audience leaned in, hanging on his every word. Even the cameraman seemed frozen in place. "I'm a man who stands by his principles," J.D. said. "You call me a lapdog because I support my president, but I don't support Trump because he tells me to. I support him because he's right." His voice hardened, cutting through the air like a blade. "And let's be clear, you don't have a problem with loyalty," he repeated. "You have a problem with the fact that I refuse to apologize for mine." The audience erupted. Emma swallowed hard. She had been exposed, and the realization was dawning on everyone watching. Emma Sinclair wasn't the one in control anymore. J.D. Vance had taken the reins, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Emma Sinclair had always been in control. She dictated the pace of every interview, steered conversations in the direction she wanted, and always ensured her guests played by her rules. But tonight was different. Tonight the control was slipping from her grasp, and millions of Americans were watching it happen in real time. J.D. Vance sat across from her, unshaken. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes carried a sharpness that unnerved her. The audience, once primed to cheer for Emma, was shifting, sensing the power dynamic changing before their eyes. Emma inhaled, determined to recover. "Mr. Vance," she said, forcing a smirk, "let's not act like you're some independent thinker. You defend Trump no matter what, and the American people deserve to know. Do you even have a mind of your own?" J.D. didn't hesitate. He leaned forward, his voice lowering just enough to command attention. "Emma," he said smoothly, "do you have a mind of your own, or do you just repeat the talking points your producers hand you every morning?" The audience gasped. Emma stiffened, her grip tightening on the desk. She had expected him to stumble, to fumble over his words like so many others before him. Instead, he was turning the tables on her. "You see, Emma," J.D. continued, his voice calm but firm, "this isn't about Trump. It's about control. You don't have a problem with loyalty. You have a problem with who I'm loyal to." Emma scoffed, trying to regain her footing. "That's ridiculous," she snapped. "Is it?" J.D. tilted his head. "Because if I blindly followed orders the way you claim, I'd be sitting here stuttering, apologizing, and begging for your approval. But I'm not. I'm standing by what I believe. The real question is, who are you standing for?" Silence. Emma's lips parted, but no words came out. The cameras caught everything, the slight tremble in her fingers, the way she shifted in her seat. Her producers were shouting in her earpiece, but their voices faded into the background. JD leaned back, watching her carefully. 4 years ago, you sat in that same chair and declared Trump would never step foot in the White House again. You laughed at the very idea, and yet here we are. Trump is president and I'm sitting across from you. So tell me, Emma, who's really out of touch with reality? The audience erupted in applause. Emma's face flushed red. She scrambled for her notes, searching for something, anything to regain control. This isn't, she started, her voice cracking slightly. JD cut her off. This is exactly what it looks like, he said, his tone unwavering. You came here tonight thinking you'd humiliate me. But the truth is, Emma, you exposed yourself. Her breath hitched. JD's voice softened, but the impact was even greater. You don't want a debate. You don't want an honest conversation. You want submission. And when you don't get it, he gestured to her, you panic. Emma's fingers trembled as she shuffled her papers. The audience wasn't just watching an interview anymore. They were witnessing a collapse. She tried to laugh it off, but it sounded hollow. I'm not panicking, she said, forcing a smile. JD didn't even need to respond. The audience saw the truth. She was unraveling. Her hands clenched into fists beneath the table. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. This was her show, her stage. She had built her career on tearing apart conservative guests, reducing them to sound bites that she could manipulate. But tonight she was the one being exposed. The weight of the moment pressed down on her, suffocating. She could feel the shift. The audience no longer on her side, the carefully crafted illusion crumbling. JD exhaled, leaning back in his chair. This isn't about me, Emma. It never was. She swallowed hard. You walked into this debate thinking you controlled the narrative, JD continued, his voice steady. But now, for the first time, you're realizing that control, he shook his head, it was never real. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every crack in her once unbreakable composure. Her lips trembled, her hands shook, and then a single tear welled in the corner of her eye. She blinked rapidly, furious at herself, but it was too late. The cameras caught everything. JD Vance hadn't just won the debate, he had broken her. Emma Sinclair, the woman who had built her entire career tearing others apart, was now the one falling apart. On live television in front of the entire nation. JD didn't smirk. He didn't gloat. He simply watched. And in that moment, Emma Sinclair knew nothing would ever be the same again. The moment the cameras cut, Emma Sinclair ripped out her earpiece and threw it onto the desk. The studio lights felt unbearably hot, and the murmurs from the audience, the same audience that was supposed to be hers, only made her nausea worse. She had lost control. No, she hadn't just lost control. She had lost everything. JD Vance, on the other hand, stood up calmly, adjusting his suit with the confidence of a man who had just won. He didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He didn't have to. The damage had already been done. Behind the scenes, chaos erupted. Producers scrambled, assistants whispered in frantic tones, and Emma's boss was already on the phone, his voice sharp with anger. Within minutes, the internet was flooded with clips of the interview. The hashtags were relentless. Emma Sinclair meltdown. JD Vance exposes media. The truth wins. Emma sat frozen in her chair, her mind racing. She had built her career on strength, on always being in control, on always having the last word, but tonight she had been shattered. Not by insults, not by cheap shots, but by the truth. Her phone buzzed non-stop with messages, some from friends trying to console her, others from colleagues distancing themselves. But the worst ones? The ones from former supporters, people who had defended her for years, now questioning everything. I used to believe in you. You let us down. Maybe JD Vance had a point. The words stung worse than JD's retorts. For the first time, Emma felt something she had never experienced before on this side of the camera. Doubt. Hours later, as the media firestorm raged on, Emma found herself in a quiet, dimly lit conference room of a private hotel. She had asked for this meeting. She didn't even know why. The door opened. and J.D. Vance stepped inside. He looked at her, not with arrogance, not with pity, but with knowing. Emma inhaled sharply. I was wrong." J.D. didn't react. He simply watched her, waiting. She clenched her hands together. "I thought I was fighting for the truth, but last night I realized I was just fighting to be right." Silence stretched between them. A single tear slipped down her cheek, but this time she didn't wipe it away. She wasn't on camera. She wasn't performing. She was just Emma Sinclair, a woman staring at the wreckage of everything she had built. "I don't expect forgiveness," she whispered. "I just needed to say it out loud." J.D. exhaled, nodding. Then, after a long pause, he said, "Then let's see what you do next." The next morning, the nation braced itself for what would happen next. Would Emma Sinclair double down? Would she attack J.D. Vance? Would she play the victim? But then, Emma walked into her newsroom and did the unthinkable. The cameras rolled. The entire country watched as she took her seat, hands clasped together. Her face was bare, stripped of the confidence and condescension that once defined her. With a deep breath, she looked into the lens and spoke. "I owe America an apology." The newsroom froze. For years, I have stood on this stage and claimed to seek the truth, but the truth is I let my bias blind me. I tried to destroy a man, not because he was wrong, but because I couldn't accept that he was right. Gasps rippled through the control room. Her producers panicked, trying to cut the feed. But Emma pushed forward. "Last night, J.D. Vance didn't just defeat me in a debate. He forced me to see myself for what I had become. And I don't want to be that person anymore." The newsroom was dead silent. No one moved. No one breathed. And across the country, millions of Americans watched. Not with anger, not with hatred, but with shock. Would this be her redemption? Or would this be the end of her career? Emma Sinclair had just taken the biggest risk of her life, and there was no going back. After the chaos and aftermath, J.D. Vance took to the stage 1 week later, determined to reshape the narrative and call the nation to a higher purpose. The auditorium was packed, the atmosphere electric with anticipation, as J.D. stepped up to the microphone, his expression resolute. In his measured tone, he began, "My fellow Americans, what we witnessed last week was more than a debate. It was a turning point. A moment when the veil of partisan rhetoric was lifted, exposing a deeper truth, that our divisions are not inherent, but are cultivated by those who thrive on discord." As J.D. spoke, his words resonated across the hall. He recounted how Emma Sinclair, a symbol of the media's unchecked power, had been forced to confront her own biases and ultimately her failures. Emma's public reckoning was not just her personal downfall, he explained, but a mirror reflecting our society's struggle with truth and integrity. We have been manipulated to believe that loyalty is synonymous with blind obedience and that questioning is a weakness. But I stand before you to declare that true strength lies in the courage to challenge our own beliefs, to admit when we are wrong, and to forge a path toward unity. J.D.'s speech was both an indictment of the divisive tactics that had long plagued the media and a call to arms for every American to seek genuine understanding over superficial allegiances. Today, he continued, I ask you to look beyond the labels of liberal and conservative and to see each other as fellow citizens united by a common destiny. Our country does not thrive on conflict, but on collaboration, on shared values, and on the relentless pursuit of truth. His words, delivered with unwavering conviction, cut through the lingering tension, stirring a sense of collective responsibility in every listener. He paused, letting the weight of his message sink in before urging action. Now is the time for each of us to embrace our differences and transform them into strengths. Let us hold our leaders accountable not for their partisanship, but for their commitment to honesty and integrity. Let us demand that our media reflects the complexity of our world, rather than a single divisive narrative. In closing, J.D. Vance extended a heartfelt invitation to every viewer. I call upon you, the people, to join me in this journey toward a more united, truthful America. Share your thoughts, your hopes, and your experiences. Let us ignite a conversation that transcends partisan lines and builds bridges instead of walls. Comment below on what this moment of reckoning means to you. How can we as a nation rise above our divisions to embrace a future founded on truth, accountability, and genuine understanding? With that, J.D. Vance's final address concluded, a stirring reminder that every setback can lead to a rebirth if we are willing to learn from our failures. His speech was not just a declaration of political allegiance. It was a call to awaken the best in each of us, to realize that the truth is our most potent weapon against division. The meaning of this story is clear. When we dare to confront our biases and challenge the status quo, we pave the way for a brighter, more inclusive future. Now the conversation is in your hands. What do you believe is the path forward for our nation? Share your thoughts and let your voice be heard.